Hello again, everybody. It's Todd Sturridge, the horror nerd, here at Groundogzilla I Heart Horrors Convention Part 3 here in Sayreville, New Jersey. The horror family coming together to support a great charity, the Deborah Heart and Lung Foundation. I'm having a blast today, seeing some old friends and some new friends. And I get to talk to a lot of people that I've known for a long time, find out what they're up to. Speaking of which, I have the honor of sitting here with Matt Blazi. Matt, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, bud. How are you?
I am doing my thing. I'm having a blast today.
Yeah.
And it's been such a fun time here at this con. Sometimes I like these smaller shows. You get to spend more time with people, and it's a little more intimate.
Yeah, this is the way shows were when I first started.
Yeah.
And having shows like this in lieu of the big mega shows with all the big A-lister current folks, it's great because you get to see a lot of people that you wouldn't see at those shows, and it's more intimate, and we can sit and have conversations for a long time and really go deep into some of the movie nerd horror stuff that we all love too, and that we don't get a chance to because we're all just getting queued out of line and all that stuff. So shows like this, I absolutely love doing.
Yeah, and like I was telling our buddy over there, Uncle Creepy, I'm just a fan, who gets to do some cool stuff.
Yep.
So the fact that I get to sit down with people that I've admired for a while or followed along or whatever is a blast for me.
Yeah.
So I see that you have a new book out. This is 8 Days in the Woods, the making of the Blair Witch Project. What prompted you to work on this project?
When the movie came out, I was 18. And I was really at the beginning of my super in-depth horror-loving world. I was big into the George Romero stuff. I was making my own George Romero Dawn of the Dead website. And I see a preview for this, and I'm like, oh, this looks interesting. And that whole summer, between high school and college, I was online trying to find out about this movie. I'd never seen anything about it, and just the way I was hearing people talk about it, because you got to remember message boards. It wasn't instantaneous, so you'd post a message and hope by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night someone would respond. So there wasn't a lot of information out there, and going to see it in the theater, I was up close, and I was just blown away. Because it was found footage. We didn't know what found footage was. We didn't see anything, and it was just completely different than what we were used to. And it stuck with me. And when I went to college, they were selling Blair Witch posters at the school store. I put them all up over my wall. I got the Stickman tattooed on my arm, and it just became just one of my favorite movies. And it seemed like, about a year or so later, it kind of died out. And I always would go back to it at least once a year, if not more. But then I ran into a friend of mine who also does movie location videos, and he had finally gone and done a Blair Witch one. Now, I'd gone to the house in 2000 while it was still standing, but I hadn't gone to Burkittsville. I hadn't done anything else. So I decided to go down and visit all the locations with a friend of mine one year. And me and another guy were like, well, what would be fun is if we do that and then we go camping. I'm like, well, let's do it.
You're a braver soul than I am. I'd be like, no.
I'm an Eagle Scout, so I'm okay with being in the woods.
Fair enough, okay.
and he wasn't able to go, but we had talked to Ed Sanchez, one of the co-directors, and Ed was like, yeah, sure, I'll come out. And he talked about it on a podcast, and someone reached out to Ed and was like, well, I want to do this. And I was like, okay. So it was me and 3 people, and Sanchez showed up for a little bit, and we just decided to, hey, let's have some fun. Let's go to the movie locations. We'll camp out. And then I decided, well, Blair Witch doesn't have like a Facebook presence. This was 2012. And so I made a Facebook group for the Blair Witch Project, thinking, okay, we'll have a couple of people, horror nerds. Well, it started catching on as Ed and some of the cast and crew started coming in, and I would post pictures of our thing, and they were like, well, are you going to do that again? And I'm like, well, I don't know. So I decided next year, well, let's do this event, which became the Blair Witch Experience, the movie location tour. And I was talking to Ed, and about that time, the film was getting ready to turn 15. And I was like, are you guys doing a new Blu-ray or anything? He said, no. And I was like, why don't I write a book? I didn't wake up that morning intending to write a book. But I kind of backed into it, and I've never written a book before, and I'm not that adept with cameras and editing, so doing a documentary wasn't something I felt I could do. But I talked to him, and I said, look, I said, I can do this, but I definitely need help. And he was like, well, we'll help you. So he gathered the troops and started introducing me to people And the more I learned about it, the deeper I wanted to go, the more I wanted to learn, because I didn't think there was that much to it. There was a lot of stuff out there, but it didn't really go into a lot of detail about how they made this movie. Like, we knew that they sent them in the woods, there wasn't a script. And I was initially thinking, like, man, there's not a lot of meat on the bone, especially if they only spend about a week in the woods. But the deeper I went down that rabbit hole, the more I was uncovering. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of stories here from so many people that worked on this that you don't think about. And I got a couple of years into it, and I was like, wow, this is going to be interesting. And it really reignited my deep love for it, because it's such a different film.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I uncovered while writing the book was, whether you loved it or hated it, you remember seeing it.
Bingo, yes.
And there's not a lot of movies that people can have that initial reaction to. You know, some people are like, oh, my favorite comedy is this, but they can't remember the first time they saw it. But this one stuck with you. And that was kind of the motivating factor to get this story out, because their stories are so good. It's about a band of people coming together to make a movie, kind of a last-ditch effort. You know, like, can we do this? You know, maybe we'll get it on HBO or in the $5 bin. They had no idea that this was going to be what it was. They weren't trying to do that, and I think that's part of the success, is that these guys were just humble college graduate film students that wanted to make a good movie. And it really shows that if you set out to make a good movie without trying to be the next big thing, you can succeed and overachieve your goals.
100%. That is a great story. So I clearly remember where and when I saw the Blair Witch Project. It wasn't playing anywhere where I lived in New Jersey, so we went to the Angelica Theater in New York City.
That's where they had its premiere.
Right, which is famous for showing, art house films or whatever. And the marketing behind it was brilliant, because they had all these supposed relics and props. Oh, this was found in the woods near where this happened. And I'm like, this is bloody brilliant.
Yeah,
know?
That marketing campaign actually was the marketing campaign that the general population saw was actually a ramped up version of what Ed and Dan had been doing a year prior. When Ed built the website and was putting little tidbits out there, they were already doing that. They weren't telling people it was real. They weren't telling people it was fake. They were just kind of putting it out there and letting people
decide
figure it out.
Right, yeah.
You know, getting a lot of people were like, I've never heard of this, and I'm from that area. This is so weird. So they just realized, oh, well, let's just keep doing it. So when the film sold at Sundance and Artisan bought it, they were like, okay, we're going to keep doing that. We're just going to crank up the volume and get it out to everybody. So that it's great. And 1999 was a very critical year for a movie like this, because a year before, not as many people had the internet.
Right.
A year later may have been white noise. So that minute window of time in the first iteration of the internet was, I think, perfect for a film like this to come out and really grab, because it went out into the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Everyone talked about it for months leading up to it, and seeing it, and then finally realizing, wow, this is different, and you couldn't get away from it for the entire year of 1999.
Another thing that you just said that resonated with me is whether you loved or hated it. For me, any movie, like when I go see a movie, the dreaded thing for me is if I feel indifferent about it. Because even if I hate a movie, it made me feel something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I remember the movie.
Yeah.
So you're right. And I talk to a lot of people about Blair Witch Project, and there are people that are like, I hate it. You know, it's stupid.
Yeah.
I happen to love it, and I will die on this hill that the last 10 minutes of this movie is some of the scariest 10 minutes I've ever seen in any horror film ever.
Yeah, it's, everyone's got a fear of being in the woods at night and hearing something, whether you've actually done that. But it's like going into the ocean after seeing Jaws. Like, you know something's down there. So it's what you don't see. And it's watching someone kind of resign themselves that they're never going to get out, but they're going to try to find their friend, and going through the woods, and then you stumble upon a house. Like, that's going to be scary. And then to go into that house when you hear someone shouting.
Yeah.
People really were they were on the edge of their seat. Like, I remember that theater being eerily quiet during that. And it's not like a lot of the films that we see where you're celebrating the kills and you want the killer to get away or the big reveal at the end. It really subverted a lot of expectations and didn't lead into those cliches and tropes that we were used to, mostly for budgetary reasons. But
Well,
then
yeah,
also, it's a simple, stripped down to its core horror film that, okay, your imagination's going to make this entirely worse than what they could ever put on screen. And I think had they done a big reveal at the end, we wouldn't talk about it like
100%, dude. That's what makes it scary, because like you said, it doesn't even necessarily have to be in the woods. It could be anything, an abandoned building, or to me, one of the scariest things is a playground at night.
Yeah.
Right? Think about that, right? It's a common thing, but that's why I think it's so effective. One thing I talk about, like in my horror fan circles that I hang with, is it's not a criticism of the film, but sort of what it wrought is there was then this avalanche of found footage movies, and a lot of them are bad because it's hard. Found footage, I think, is hard to pull off effectively because you fall into the trap of you're running for your life. Why are you still holding on to that camera?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and think about the society we live in now. You can't walk in the mall without someone filming
you. Yeah.
So it was super ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is when you go from Blair Witch until you get to about Paranormal Activity, there's not a lot of well-known found footage films. You know, a couple came out here or there, but they never really like made it on the radar. But then you get to Paranormal Activity, and you get to Cloverfield, Diary of the Dead, and you're right. It's when you get to why are you still filming? They kind of address that in the movie. It's, you know, Heather's a dedicated filmmaker. She's documenting this because it's all she's got. And I think that is the most critical part of a found footage film is don't make the audience wonder why you're still filming, because it's going to take you right out of it.
Right, exactly.
If there is a reason why you're filming, whether it's a movie about a streamer or, you know, a dash cam, or if you have a valid reason and you don't really call attention to it, then that movie will be effective, whether it's a news crew or something. If you can get over that initial hurdle and put some care and effort into that story, then the found footage is gonna be better than what you imagine. But trying not to be the next Blair Witch, I think, is also a disservice that a lot of found footage films can get into. They want to be the next Blair Witch.
Yep.
Be the first of whatever it is you're doing. Try something different. You know, with TikTok and live streaming all the time, we've gotten Deadstream, which is a really good movie. We had a dash cam. We get a lot of these movies, and you know, the VHS subgenre has done well.
There was a good one called Host.
Oh, I love Host.
That's so good, right?
I could talk about Host
because that was freaking.
Because it was all on Zoom.
That was legit creepy. Yep.
Everyone understood that we were on Zoom during the pandemic, and it made total sense.
Yes.
It was a way for us to be with our friends without being together.
Yep.
And it made sense. It didn't really draw attention to itself.
Right. Because my whole job, I work in IT, so my whole job for a year was nothing but Zoom, you know, or Meet Teams or whatever.
Yeah.
So no, that one was good.
Yes.
That one was
I could
really
talk about
good.
Host all day.
All right. A fellow Host fan. I love it. I love it. See that movie, folks. It's only like an hour, too.
It's 59 minutes.
Right.
It's the length of a Zoom session.
Yes.
And that's the perfect part. Like, they just worked it into, we're going to get in, get out, and be effective. And I think that's great, because I think if you go too long, you're drawing it out.
Yep.
You know, you're trying to get one more big scare, but Host just gets you in and going within the first 5 minutes. And Blair Witch does too. I mean, they're in the woods within 10 minutes of an 82-minute film.
Yeah.
And they shot 22 hours of footage, which, you know, when you look at a major motion picture, that's nothing.
Right.
But it was supposed to be a documentary with little bits and pieces of the woods footage, but they found that what they shot in the woods was more effective than cutting back and forth to your experts and your talking heads.
Right.
And it was a gamble. The movie we saw was not the movie they intended to make.
Okay.
It was supposed to look like the Sci-Fi Channel special.
Gotcha. Okay.
And they did a 3.5-hour screening at the Enzion in Florida, and a producer came in and said, "Hey, that's your movie." And they were like, No, we're not done. They go, No, you've got your movie. So they pivoted and really worked it over the next few months before submitting to Sundance as to what they were going to do. And they did all these types of edits to try to figure out what worked, and they finally just decided, we're going to put a title card on it, and we're just going to let it run. And I think that was the best choice that they could make.
Dude, so we'll wrap it up. I don't want to keep you for too long. I could talk about this movie with you all day because I am firmly in the camp of I loved it because it changed horror movies. It changed movies, you know, and then the way it took off and the success, and then the movie that we will not talk about that came after it.
Yeah, we don't discuss that.
No, but that's the kind of movie where I think if it hadn't been called what it was called, would have actually been a decent movie.
It could have, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Reworking some of that story would have made it. It still would have been a victim of like the early 2000s type of horror craze. I could do a deep dive on that, but yeah, attaching that name to that story and rushing it like they did and not giving this movie time to breathe and then bringing people back in with something like that, it was a victim of its own of that success. It just didn't, there was no way it could live up to that hype. They tried it. You can't catch lightning in a bottle twice.
Exactly. So, all right. So, Matt, one last question. What's your next thing? What new projects do you have working on that you can share with us?
Yes, I am touching Steve's balls and caressing Paco.
You're touching Paco inappropriately. Paco, tell me where the bad man touched you.
There's no bad man. This is not inappropriate to Paco. I'm co-host of the Garf Network show, Garf 247, where we do new and cult classic retrospectives with the filmmakers and everything. Obviously, I run the Blair Witch Experience every year in October, where I take fans out on film location tours from the movie. I'm always dabbling in stuff, movie locations and whatnot. I have an idea for a second book. It's not single movie related, but it's in relation to movies. So I'm starting to ramp up my preparation for that.
Nice. Matt, it's good to talk to you finally. Like I said, I feel like I've known you forever, and it's the first time we sat down. So we will definitely do it again.
Yes.
You know, I want to read the book, and then I'll probably have a million more questions about it.
All right. So I love talking about it.
8 Days in the Woods. Everybody, tell everybody where they can get the book.
You can get the book on Amazon. You can reach out to me on social media. I usually always have copies if you want it autographed, but that's the best place to find it.
Awesome. Matt Blazi, everybody, here at Groundogzilla 2025, a.k.a. I Heart Horror Part 3. This is the Horror Nerd Todd Sturut signing off. We will see all of you in the next interview.